r/nosleep. Posted by you/likeeyedid. My neighbors take the curfew a little too seriously. I live inside one of those picture-perfect gated neighborhoods. A place where life is always safe and sound because nobody can come in and disturb the peace that is so naturally dear to the residents' hearts. Not with all the security in place. Cameras on each corner watching every step, neighbors that are extra attentive, and then we have this cold and ugly concrete building at the entrance where the security people work. It's probably the only hideous piece of architecture in here and has one of the guards standing right at the gate and greeting everyone who passes by with a friendly wave and smile. That is if they truly belong here, of course. The loud and busy town isn't far away, but if you stood behind the gate you wouldn't be able to tell, as we are half surrounded by deep forest. My new neighborhood, named Sanctuary Hills despite not sitting on a hill, is the essence of suburbia. Two-level homes, often in hunter green or eggshell white, embellish the wide streets with long driveways. The homes are big enough for generations but usually only inhabited by a married couple with one child and a dog. When a family is very extraordinary they might have a cat instead, but that's the tip of craziness the people here might express. The people that live here are the kind that cut the grass on their lawns on the same day each week. Every building here has a spacious pool, many shaped just like kidneys, but most are hardly used. Except for when there is a pool party, of course, and there are many. Usually in combination with a barbecue. In the short time I lived here I must have been invited to 3 already, but I didn't make it to one. They usually start very early in the day when I still work. While I never imagined this to be my cup of tea, I am still astonished by the way I enjoy these surroundings that are so perfect it should be uncanny, but somehow it's not. Somehow you do always feel safe. It really is a nice neighborhood, even if I don't entirely fit the demographic. I only came here very recently after my grandmother started getting more unwell. She's been living on her own since Grandpa passed, and as I work remote, it seemed perfectly reasonable for me to come and live with her. She doesn't need anyone to take care of her physically, just company that is around and ready if her head starts to spin. Besides, Grandma is as sweet as grandmothers get. So being here for her is more than simple for me. And I get to live in a beautiful home in a wonderful place. The only negative side to all this is the lack of people my age. Most residents are either rather old and have been living here for centuries, or they're middle-aged with children, seldom plural and in many cases singular. To repeat myself, neither really fits my demographic, but for now, this is totally fine. Especially considering social interactions are currently limited either way. It's one of the reasons, or possibly the main one, why I didn't mind when I was told about the curfew. I've heard of many places and towns that believe a curfew could be beneficial to our current situation. And well, here inside Sanctuary Hills there aren't many places I'd go anyway. Especially not at night. The curfew begins right after dinner time, which currently is 8 p.m., just after sunset. It was one of the first things that Grandma told me when I arrived, and something she still repeats regularly. Make sure to be back inside before curfew. People really do not appreciate it if you don't. They're a sucker for rules, she said with a smile that didn't match the sentiment in her voice. Sure, that's fine. It's not forever, right? I laughed. Of course not, the sun moves with the days. Soon you'll have more time. What? As I said, physically Grandma was feeling fine. Mentally, however, her mind was not as sharp as it used to be. Can you go to the store, hun? What time is it now? She asked now with a much calmer expression. It was only 2 p.m. when I made my way to the store, and less than half an hour later I was standing in the queue waiting for my turn. The store is rather a small shop but has everything we need. If we wanted to splurge I suppose we could go to the markets in town, but Grandma likes the products here and is very used to them. Grandpa used to enjoy them as well, and honestly, I like them too. The produce is fresh, and while the brands are unfamiliar everything tastes nice. So I was standing in line when I saw the only person so far that truly grabbed my attention in a very different way than the other people here. If I notice the people in Sanctuary Hills, it usually is because they seem so peculiar with their looks and their tastes. With hair too high and makeup too bright, as if they recently escaped out of a book by Dr. Seuss. The person that I saw standing just in front of the grocery store, however, was a young man, around my age, dressed in a denim jacket, black pants, and a kinks shirt. He was holding a cigarette but not even taking a drag. Instead, he seemed focused on something in the air or possibly on the lamp post. I could have just walked out and talked to him, but I used to live in a big city where you usually don't talk to neighbors at all, and somehow I felt too shy. So I found an excuse by buying a pack of cigarettes at the counter, despite not having smoked in years, and asked the stranger for a lighter as I walked outside with my paper bag filled with groceries. I suppose I really was a bit desperate for friends in this lonely place. You're new here, aren't you? He asked after lighting up my cigarette. I suppressed the urge to cough and answered yeah, I'm staying with my grandma for a while. He inspected me a second too long and then said, Abigail Allen? That's her. How do you know? The neighborhood wasn't big and if he lived here for a while it wouldn't surprise me if he knew most people, but guessing simply from my appearance alone was a bit too fast. He grinned. I'm not a stalker, I promise. I know all the people that live here and hear about any newcomlings right away. Well, that's not strange at all. He laughed. I have a good reason, I swear. I'm in charge of the security systems here and usually install the cameras for the people's homes as well. He pointed towards the thing he earlier was looking at. It was a security camera hanging on top of the lamp post. You know, it's kind of ironic, I usually feel far more unsafe when there is too much security. Like there has to be a reason they're so careful, right? I said and already started regretting my words, but the guy smiled again. To be honest, I don't see the purpose either, but I get paid so I won't complain. So let's hope the people here stay paranoid, I laughed. We chatted a bit longer than I initially imagined we would, but I assume the stranger, his name was Jack as I found out, didn't have much interaction with peers in Sanctuary Hills either. He did know people in town however and invited me to go for a beer by the river with him. Just after dinner. And the curfew? I raised an eyebrow. Jack gave me a funny look as if I was a bit clueless. How old are you? Now he was raising an eyebrow. I rolled my eyes. Funny, I'm 25, but you know what curfew I mean. They blast it through the speakers every evening. Jack chuckled. All right, I see. And you live with your grandma too, who probably doesn't go out at night either way, but trust me, you can. I think it's more so the kids stay inside. Nobody is gonna arrest you for leaving the house after 8, Charlie. So far I never really had a reason to go outside, but thinking about it, Sanctuary Hills had such a small population, and going to a different place for one evening seemed perfectly reasonable. Depending on how long I would stay here, finding some friends would be nice. Besides, Jack worked for the security system or whatever, if it was that forbidden, he would know. Alright. I'm in, I decided. Cool, so shall we meet at the gate? Just after 8? Grandma and I had dinner, but she was rather tired and went to bed early. I hadn't told her about my plans to go out, but I figured I'd leave her a note. And I'd take my phone with me so she could reach me if she needed to. I noticed that I was a bit late when I suddenly heard the announcements from the street. I'd heard them the past days too, of course, but somehow they seemed even louder now. Attention, attention. Residents of Sanctuary Hills, please be aware that the curfew begins in only 5 minutes. Find your way home swiftly and have a pleasant sanctuary evening inside your homes. The announcement started and ended with a jingle. I must say I felt a bit nervous going outside after hearing the announcement. I'd been a lot more confident when I was talking to Jack. Suddenly I also felt guilty for wanting to leave without Grandma knowing. I sighed and made the choice not to go out. However, I didn't have Jack's number and simply not showing up would really be rude. So I decided I would quickly run down to the gate, tell him to leave without me, and come back home. A few minutes outside past curfew really shouldn't be an issue after all. Well, that's the point when I learned how seriously the curfew really is taken by the people of Sanctuary Hills. I learned the hard way when I opened the door to my home only a few minutes before 8. As I opened the wooden door, I was greeted by 2 bright faces grinning so intensely, it almost appeared as if they were in pain. A man and a woman that I hadn't seen before. She had red hair with much volume and was wearing round pink glasses. Her lips were bright red and her flowery dress seemed not casual at all. He completed her look with a button-down shirt, perfectly ironed brown pants, and shiny loafers. They looked strangely old-fashioned, even more than the other people here. Well, hello there, what a sweet darling you are. Don't you agree, Harold? The woman said, and the makeup on her face started cracking from her non-stopping smile. Oh, pleasantly darling, truly my dear. I laughed politely but mainly nervously. Good evening, are you looking for my grandma? I asked. Oh no, dear, we're not. Abigail is a sweetheart and often by bed before the time. She doesn't worry us one bit, the woman spoke. Worry? Why would? We hope you did not intend to leave the house, that would be an awful mistake. Haven't you looked at the time? Must have slipped your mind. Well now, swiftly go back in and we will forgive and forget. They both laughed, and now all of a sudden they were sounding nervous. I'm sorry, have we met? I asked and my eyes moved to the clock above our door. I never thought about it before, but it was a strange place to hang a clock. They didn't answer my question. The man now had his hand in the door frame, too close for my taste. "I'm only planning to bring a message to a friend, I'll be right back home," I said, feeling weird that I had to make excuses for doing something so normal. No reasonable friend would meet you at a time like that, my dear. "Now, will you listen or not?" They were still smiling, but their voices were raised so high I was afraid they would wake Grandma. "Right. I'm sorry, where do you live?" I asked. They turned their heads in a half circle and pointed towards the scarlet red house on the other side of the street. I had been wondering who lived in a house so noticeable. Their heads moved back so quickly that their necks had no chance to follow. For a second I thought they might break. My feet moved back faster than I could think. My gut started screaming to shut the door. Those creatures that called themselves neighbors were far too uncanny. Something was utterly wrong with them. It made my blood almost freeze. "How did you?" I muttered and then swallowed. "I promise I won't go outside." "Where?" the woman shouted. At that point I was more than worried. These people were scaring me. And the slowly setting sun was only adding to the gloomy atmosphere. I shut the door without another thought. My hands started shaking and I didn't understand why. I didn't understand how I was suddenly so scared by such a situation that should be ordinary from an outsider's perspective. I wanted to go and talk to the only person that I'd met and somehow trusted, but I couldn't possibly leave Grandma. Should I call the police? I wondered. But changed my mind as those weirdos hadn't actually done anything. I stood in front of the closed door, but I could still hear them. They didn't leave. I heard them breathing, louder and louder by the second. I had to go wake Grandma, was my second thought, but it was interrupted. A shiver went through my body when I felt a sharp pain in my left arm. "What are you doing?" I turned my head and my eyes met the ones of Abigail. My grandmother stared at me with pupils so big I thought her eyes were all black. Her nails were digging into my skin. When she saw my scared expression, she let go. "I'm sorry, honey. I told you not to go out after dark. They don't like it. They don't like it one bit." I thought my grandmother's mind was a bit confused, but after seeing those neighbors, she appeared like the sharp one. "Come look," she waved me to the window. My stomach made a turn when I saw Harold and his strange wife standing on our lawn waving. There appeared to be other people behind them too, but I couldn't look at them for long. Grandmother waved back and that seemed to make them happy, but not happy enough to leave. No, they stayed. They stayed for hours despite the curfew that they were now breaking themselves. Or maybe it didn't count because they were standing on a lawn? That's when Grandma pulled me away from the window and closed the blinds. They shielded us from views outside but not from the noise. The noise of ear-splitting screams, painful and sharp. I couldn't exactly tell if they were near or simply so loud that you heard them through the entire neighborhood. My first thought was that it had to be Jack somewhere outside, but I couldn't say for sure. What had I gotten myself into? All I knew was that there was no way I could go outside. I was stuck in here, at least in safety for now. "You woke them up, now they'll stay for a bit," Grandma interrupted my thoughts as she gently stroked my hair. "But it's all good, love. Just stay inside with me until morning, yes?"